I am so excited. We're here at Race Summit 2025, and I'm here with Brendan Burns.
Hi there. I'm Brendan Burns. I'm the co-founder of the Kubernetes open source project. I'm currently a corporate vice president for Azure Cloud Native and Management Platform.
And thank you for being here.
Oh, absolutely. It's great.
So you're here at Race Summit 2025. We'll talk about some of the announcements that happened today, which only happened I think a few hours ago. But I want to start, you've co-founded Kubernetes. You've seen so many different shifts in the industry. Can I take you back to how you got even into open source? It's an open source centric conference. And
Yeah. So, I mean, there's sort of two stories for me getting involved in open source. The first story actually involves dumpster diving.
I love it already.
So you like it already? So where I was going to school in Massachusetts, the IT folks threw the old computers out behind the building, right? And we knew where this was, and so we would occasionally go and find computers that looked interesting that had been discarded by the IT.
Somebody's trash is someone else's treasure?
Well, you're a college student, right? So I grabbed this old Mac, but we always used Unix, and I wanted to use Unix. So I discovered this project called NetBSD. I think it still exists. I don't know at the time. But it was a Unix that you could install on these really ancient old Macintoshes. And so that was my first open source experience in terms of being on the forum and asking questions and being like, okay, I'm trying this and it's crashing. And people are like, well, try this. And you learn that whole thing. And fast forward into the early .com era, 1999, 2000-ish. I was in Boston, first job out of college, working, and we were looking to load test our website. And there was this tool called JMeter, which still exists actually. I'm emailing these patches and nobody's answering. And I'm like, anybody home? And eventually someone's like, yeah, there's nobody's doing this. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I can do it.
So you maintained it because
I started becoming a maintainer because I wanted to get my patches merged. And then a couple of us for a couple of years maintained it. And then as is the way, I went back to grad school and sort of faded away and someone else took it over. And then, from there I sort of knew, because it's kind of about learning how do you do open source.
Right. It's a whole...
And so that was how I got involved. And then I kind of have been involved in projects ever since. And then I'd say, with Kubernetes, it was really the first one that we kind of did from scratch, right? And thought about more than just previous to that, it was all just about how do I build something really great, do the source code, do the releases. And I think with Kubernetes, it was really also about how do we do the community? How do we do code of conduct? How do we do... even conferences or...
It's like a culture around it.
It's a whole thing, right? And so there was a ton of learning about that side of open source that happened that was interesting. And then when I had the opportunity to join Microsoft, it was also about how do you teach a company to do open source, right? They'd already started down that journey, but we spent a lot of time just kind of working teams through, how do you adopt it well? How do you make sure it's secure? How do you keep it reliable? All this sort of stuff.
What was the pain point that really caused the development of Kubernetes too?
I mean, I think the pain point for me was I was building a system to deploy various other open source packages, like MySQL or whatever, and we would work really, really hard on these scripts and things like that. And they would work 85% of the time, literally. And that was after you'd done a bunch of work to harden it. And so when we saw Docker coming with containers and getting a lot of energy around containerization and that immutable artifact, we saw a need for orchestration. Docker was very focused on how do I get something on one machine? Run one thing on one machine.
It's not the multiple boxes.
Yeah, and we knew because I built a lot of reliable services and at-scale services. And it's it's not about running it on one machine. It's about running it across a fleet of machines. And it's not even just about running the things. It's also about how does the storage connect in? How does the load balancer connect in? And so we kind of came up with the MVP, minimum viable product of what are the pieces you need to put together to deploy a reasonably scalable system. And that was sort of the genesis of it started out as a demo and then it turned into a really hacked together demo, honestly.
It always does.
No, it always does. And then it turned into something to open source. And then we spent a lot of time pounding the pavement because I think that's the other thing. A lot of people are the Kubernetes, of course it won, it took over. And you're well, actually it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm so curious because we talk about winning like certain stacks and certain things. When did you feel that shift happened for Kubernetes?
It's really interesting because I did actually feel it.
Right.
I almost it's almost like a physical feeling, right? And it was, I'd say middle 2016-ish.
Yeah.
Maybe early 2016-ish. So we'd launched in 2014. In fact, actually someone was telling me, and I didn't remember, but in this hotel.
Whoa.
So like,
because this is a fake living room and an expo. So,
oh yeah.
by the way,
all right, you can cut that.
no, that's fine. We'll show B-roll of the expo.
Right. But
that is so cool.
So DockerCon was here, and we launched Kubernetes, and there was a solid 2 years where Mesos and Swarm and Kubernetes were kind of fighting it out about who was going to be the one who won. And then in 2016, it was like I almost felt like there was a tailwind. Like it was like from when you turn around, like you've been running into the wind for like 2 years, and then suddenly you turn around and the wind's at your back.
Yeah.
And everything became easier, right?
It's
and now I
it's
felt
like the
that.
runner. How do you call it? The runner's high?
I run a lot.
Yeah.
I'm a believer that the runner's high is kind of a myth.
Okay.
But running into the wind is painful, and running with the wind is nice.
Okay, so with the wind, running with the wind. That
running
works.
with the wind. Yeah.
And what year did Kubernetes join the CNCF?
CNCF was 2015. When we started, CNCF was started to sort of hold Kubernetes.
What are your thoughts on as far as Linux Foundation and Ray actually recently joined the Linux Foundation, now is part of, under Linux Foundation, under the sub-foundation of PyTorch. What are your thoughts as far as like the importance of that governance?
Yeah, I put it actually on LinkedIn when they did the announce. I think it's critically important for true success for these kinds of pieces of software to be in vendor-neutral open source foundations, because it's really the only way to get everybody to feel comfortable contributing, right? Because open source licenses are great for sharing the source, but there's so much more around like trademark and copyright and just sort of like ownership of direction, like the governance stuff.
Yeah.
That it's really important for people to feel comfortable with. And I feel like the only way you get there is through like a vendor neutral foundation.
Right.
CNCF, PyTorch, whatever it happens to be.
And it's amazing because you have like the AI compute stack. I feel like that's emerging right now that has like, and all of it is under Linux. It just feels like you're probably like, how do you feel like it will help developers? And
I think that is true. Like the CNCF, like I think for us, a lot of it was like, how do you build trust? But then it turned into an ecosystem, right? And it turned into, honestly, sometimes you think it's too much. It's like kind of an eye chart, like a little too much of an ecosystem. Actually, to be honest, like that is one of the interesting challenges. CNCF, when it started, didn't have the hierarchy of like graduated, incubating, and sandbox. And it was 2015. It was just like anything could be in it, basically. But then you rapidly realize there's different levels of maturity. And you don't want necessarily, Kubernetes and some random open source project to sort of look like they're the same level of maturity, because you end up with people adopting it and then there's nobody maintaining it or whatever, right? And so I think that's the interesting thing about Foundation is that you have to kind of figure out, like, if you're going to build the AI stack, well, you probably want to have multiple choices for different pieces, because otherwise it's too restrictive.
Right.
But at the same time, you don't want to, like, if something is widely adopted and something's barely adopted, you don't want them to look like, in terms of logo and all that kind of, you don't want them to look the same. Like you want to be able to tell people, like, that one is an experiment, this one is production grade.
Do you feel like there's a reason, like with AI infra specifically, things tend to be sticky? I feel like, right? It's like harder to change.
I think some of it's harder to change. Some of the problems are just really hard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you look at some place and you're like, well, there's actually only like 10 humans in the world who know how to write that code.
Exactly.
That's the one they wrote. Right?
Well, speaking of, we're here at Ray Summit 2025. You had a huge announcement today, Anyscale and Microsoft. Can you tell us more about that announcement?
Yeah.
And what pain point that came from as well?
Yeah.
I know like there's hundreds of enterprises that run Ray on AKS specifically.
Yeah.
How did that come about too?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about the partnership. I mentioned on all of our partnerships, I think, grow out of customer interest, right? At the end of the day, we want to make our customers successful. We saw a bunch of people who are adopting open source Ray. But also our customers like really have a day job, right?
Yeah.
And running AI infra is not their day job, right? Yeah. And so we saw an opportunity to build this managed solution where people can focus on the benefits that Ray provides and the benefits that Anyscale provides with Ray Turbo, running in Azure, running in their virtual network, integrated with the rest. Because, Ray isn't the only thing they're going to use to build their application, but integrated with things like Cosmos DB, which is our NoSQL store, and all of the other stuff.
And they can do it natively in Azure.
They can do it natively. They can retire their Azure commitments, with licensing for Anyscale. So like all of that is really beneficial to all of us, right? It's beneficial to the customers. It's great for Microsoft. It's great for Anyscale. It's been a really great partnership for us.
Yeah.
Right.
What use cases have you seen that kind of combination industry-wise or
like
finance?
I think the most interesting thing is I think people have evolved from I'm going to send my prompt to an API and get a response back to like, actually there's a kind of almost a workflow of like, hey, I need to do entity extraction. Maybe I need to go to a vector database. So there's a bunch of different
they need the flexibility,
pre-processing before they go to the final result. And I think Ray is a great way to express that workflow. It's also a good way to balance, some things will be better on CPU, some things will be better on GPU.
Right.
How can I provide one environment that can go to multiple destinations?
Yeah,
so I think those are all reasons that people are looking at it.
The complexity, the multimodal data, the heterogeneous compute.
Yeah, and then also, even just like simplifying stuff. Like I love the RDMA work that was announced today.
Yeah.
The way you can integrate that is very simple, right? And so hiding some of that complexity is also, I think, a real benefit of Ray.
Yeah. Well, we're super excited about that. And I think if we zoom out, Kubernetes has been used in ML pre the GPT time, right? It was used for classic ML for years. And so you've seen kind of that whole shift. How has that changed for Kubernetes in general, too, to go to the more modern, like the more LLM heavy workload?
I think really the biggest change is that the size of the models and also even the size of the training jobs has necessitated us to build additional capabilities in Kubernetes. I think previous to some of the later generations, the people doing AI, they looked kind of like any other application, right? And they didn't have to worry about like, oh, these three things are co-located on an InfiniBand connection for low latency, or this is all one rack. Like really, really advanced use cases sometimes cared about things like rack locality.
Yeah.
Now I think as you're starting to do distributed inference, models are big enough. You need to actually coordinate work across multiple GPUs, across multiple machines. People are having to worry about the specifics of like where exactly is that job landing. So you see things being developed like gang scheduling, where I can actually say, I want all 6 of these pods to land in the same rack. I don't care which rack,
right?
But I want them to land on the same rack,
on the same one.
Right?
I don't want to deal with.
I don't want to deal with higher latency, and that's a new capability that was developed. There's a lot of work in this thing called DRA, which is how we model the resources, dynamic resource allocation. It's the way we model the resources so that you can schedule against these GPUs where they may have an NVLink connection, and if you consume one of the GPUs. You've actually slowed down work that might be happening on the other one unless you get both of them, right? And so there was these kinds of resource constraints that we hadn't dealt with when all you're doing is scheduling CPU and memory.
Right.
That you now have to do when the hardware is interconnected in different ways.
Does that make managed Kubernetes, does that make the shift to managed Kubernetes also more important?
I think it's always been important, I guess is what I would say. But I think it is a great example of the fact that, if you are developing all this onto your own hardware in your own data center, you have to figure out all this stuff, right? And you have to figure out like, oh, how do we install the right operators? How do we configure it right? Now at KubeCon, they're going forward with the AI conformance program for Kubernetes, right? And, my team's been involved and teams from across the industry have been involved in defining what AI conformance means. So now you're going to be able to say AKS is AI conformant. That means this kind of workload is guaranteed to work. Like these components are going to be installed. You'll be able to have the same thing on other clouds. And that I think is a sign that, that management of giving you something where you can just start doing the AI.
Yeah.
Like forget about the Kubernetes bits.
You don't have to focus on all this infra side.
Right. And go from there. And then of course, like it goes on top of all the other stuff we've always delivered, which is security updates, reliable upgrades, all of the other kinds of auto scale, like all the other kinds of management stuff that I was talking to someone else. Like I think people for early on, they kind of wanted to be the one at the party who built the biggest Kubernetes cluster. And then eventually they realized it's really annoying to get paged in the middle of the night when it doesn't work.
I used to be an SRE.
Yeah.
And I have
Yeah. And it's funny because there is that period where everybody wants to be like, I built the 10,000 one. And you're like, and then eventually they're like, this is a pain in the neck.
It's nice initially till at some point.
Until you have to do the first upgrade, right? Or the first CVE or, whatever, right?
How's it been for you? I know you also maintain a lot of things still, and you're managing, I don't know, how many people?
About 1,400.
Yeah. Okay. About 1,400 people. What is something you encourage for AI builders and people? There's I think a lot of people are also coming maybe from infra, upskilling into AI ML. Maybe they're there's a lot of changing happening as far as complex AI workloads? What are you seeing as far as demand for certain things, especially with customers? Demand as far as open source, like for people to contribute community-wise, and maintainers as far as open source.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is that aspect of how much math do I have to have learned in order to be able to contribute, you know?
Yeah.
And I think there are areas of that, but I think actually a lot of AI is just distributed systems.
Truly.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, I need more network bandwidth. Oh, I need more disk IOPS, right? Like, and so, you know, and sometimes I feel like there's a habit of the AI people to kind of dress it up and be like, no, it's AI. And you're like, oh, I think it's still just network bandwidth.
Yeah.
Right. So I do think a lot of the skills translate.
Yeah.
But it helps to learn the way that people think about it because it's no longer in service of maybe RPCs.
Right.
It's in service of model loading.
Even if you think about post-training, right? It gets so complicated if you're doing like reinforcement learning with human feedback and you're like, if you think about it, it's all orchestration also.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's all workflow. It's a workflow. It's like workflow at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
You know, and the failure modes they're in.
Right. Exactly.
And I think that's true for all sorts of places, that a lot of it is just thinking about like, how does the system fail? How do I checkpoint it in a way? Like, you don't have to understand how the weights work to be like, okay, I need to write all this data down so that if something crashes, I can get it back.
Right. Even like the config, right? It's like, you got to be this, got to have these things, got to tell it what GPUs, got to tell it where the checkpoints are, you know. Maybe have another head node. I don't know. No, that's fantastic.
So, a lot of the skills transfer, but it is good to learn, right? It is to at least get that mental model of like, what is a neural net? You know, how does backpropagation learning work? Like, it's good. What is RL? You know,
what would you like to see more of right now as far as like open source and in this space? Do you feel like?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually in AI, I mentioned this earlier, but I think in the AI space right now, that in the open source world, the people who are doing the open source are a lot deep tech. Like, they really understand it down to the lowest level. And, you know, we saw this in the early days of Kubernetes as well. And I think the challenge there is that they don't necessarily always appreciate the things that other people find hard. Right. And because it's easy for them, right? Or else they wouldn't be in like the deep part of it. And I think in this moment, the right thing we're supposed to be trying to do is figure out how to take those concepts and package them up into things that other people can consume that may not be deep and may never be deep.
Right.
And what are those libraries? I mean, I think VLLM is a great example where they're starting to do some of this stuff. Yeah. But there's even more room to go.
To go a little more top of funnel.
And also remember that like, AI is not the end goal, right? There is some business proposition out there that is the end goal, right?
Exactly.
Like giving value somewhere, right? And so it's an app developer who's going to turn this into something real.
Yeah.
What is it that they want to think about?
Yeah.
Right? How do they want to think about the concepts that they're using to build whatever the app is that's going to use AI to deliver a ton of value, right? And I think that's the part. Because right now we're in that, like, we're AI practitioners as opposed to we're app builders that use AI. Like,
everything gets abstracted, you know.
That's
so
the
I went to a coding
science.
bootcamp in 2015. And the only reason I probably could have gone to a coding bootcamp was because at that point we had things like Node.js, like there were frameworks on top that you were able to start building. You still needed to backtrack on fundamentals, in my opinion. But like you were able to start building and doing things with frameworks that kind of made it easier. We always abstract, and we're seeing, I think, a lot more abstraction. I mean, but also complexity of like what we're
But
building.
even from the beginning, from like machine code to compilers and all this sort of stuff, and even like the amount. I mean, I remember I had to ask my parents for a compiler for a Christmas present. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, my Christmas present one year was a compiler.
That is so great. That is a great story.
And it's because, like, at the time, that software, you had to pay for it.
Right.
You didn't have the, like, oh, we'll just download Node.js off the internet and, like, watch some YouTube videos.
Right, it's accessibility,
too. It was totally about accessibility, right? I had a book and a compiler that came on disks.
Now everybody had access. Even when you wanted to do things also, like, let's say, right now it's a very remote type. You could do a lot of things in tech remote. But before that, I think you had to be, like, you know, there were machines that you couldn't move with you home, you know. So it's crazy how in every aspect there's so much abstraction throughout. Yeah, no, it's fantastic.
Yeah, that's really amazing.
Yeah, and I think that more people will be builders in some respects too.
Well, I mean, I was actually just talking to my wife about this, who is not not a coder, but she has ideas about stuff that she wants to see built, and I was like, you really need to sit down and try GitHub Copilot.
Yeah,
because it literally is just talking to it.
Right.
And I think it really will unlock people who have great ideas, but who haven't necessarily known how to get them turned into something. to turn it into something.
Exciting times.
Yeah.
Any final advice on when building with Kubernetes specifically or with AKS? Now with AI workloads?
There's a great book that I wrote called Kubernetes Up and Running.
We should cue that.
No, that's my product plug. No, I think get involved, I guess, is what I'd say. I mean, I get a ton just from being willing to get into the communities and help, and maybe not do the most exciting part, but do the most important part that makes a real difference.
Brendan, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your time. We're so excited about the partnership too.
Yeah.
And
thanks for having me.
See you soon, hopefully, in the next conference.